Halloween night, a time for costumes, laughter, and candy, but behind the smiles and glowing pumpkins, some stories are too real to ignore. Tonight, we dive into 3 true Halloween night horror stories. Tales that remind us the scariest things don't hide in haunted houses. They walk among us. I've always liked Halloween, not the parties or the costumes, but the quiet part of it. The streets after 10 when most of the kids have gone home, the wind is cold, and the jack-o'-lanterns flicker on empty porches. I live alone on the edge of a small town in New Hampshire, a 1-story house near the woods, about a 15-minute drive from the main road. It's the kind of place where trick-or-treaters rarely show up, and when they do, it's usually by accident. That night, October 31st last year, I was sitting in my living room, half watching an old horror movie with the lights low. It was around 2 a.m. I remember because I had just looked at my phone before deciding to call it a night. That's when I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my front door. At first I thought I imagined it, but then another set of knocks. This time softer. I muted the TV, listening. The sound was real. Someone was standing on my porch. My first thought was that maybe a car had broken down nearby or some drunk teenager needed help. It was Halloween night after all. Still, something about it felt wrong. The air felt too still. No crickets, no wind. Just those quiet knocks. I got up and went to the door, peeking through the peephole. There was a little girl standing there. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. She wore a tattered princess costume, faded pink with dirt on the hem, and held a small crumpled orange candy bag in one hand. Her other hand hung at her side, completely still. She wasn't looking up at the door, just staring down at her shoes. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure what to do. My porch light flickered. It always does that when it's cold. And for a split second I thought her dress looked wet. But maybe that was just my eyes playing tricks. I opened the door just a little, the chain still on. "Hey, are you lost?" I asked. No answer. The girl slowly lifted her head. Her face looked pale under the porch light, and her hair was tangled, not in a messy kid way, more like she'd been outside for hours. "Where are your parents?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked at me for the first time then. Her eyes were dark, wide, almost blank. Then she spoke. Soft, almost whispering, "Can I have candy?" Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. It wasn't the request, it was the tone. It didn't sound like a question from a kid. It sounded like something she'd practiced. Yeah, sure, hang on." I closed the door, gently leaving it on the latch, and went to the kitchen where I had some leftover fun-size candy bars from earlier in the evening. As I grabbed a handful, I heard something, a faint scraping sound, like movement outside. When I went back to the door and looked through the peephole, she wasn't there. The porch was empty. No footsteps, no sound, just the wind picking up through the trees. I opened the door and stepped outside, glancing around the yard. There were no car lights on the road, no rustling bushes, or nothing. I called out, "Hey, little girl?" No response. Just that still cold air. I waited for maybe a minute before going back in, locking the door this time. About 10 minutes later, I was sitting back on the couch when I heard it again. Tap. 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 But this time, it wasn't at the front door. It was coming from the back window. I froze. My back window faces the woods, about 15 feet from the tree line. No one should be out there. I turned off the TV and listened. Nothing now, just silence. I slowly walked to the kitchen, keeping the lights off so I could see outside better. The motion light above the back porch flickered on, and there she was, the same girl, standing just outside the glass, candy bag, still in her hand, staring in. Her expression hadn't changed, still blank, almost lifeless. But her head was tilted just slightly to the side now, like she was curious. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. For maybe 10 seconds, we just stared at each other through the glass. Then she stepped closer. I backed away, reaching for my phone. but by the time I looked back up, she was gone again. I called the local sheriff's office. They told me they'd send a patrol car to check the area, but since I didn't have an address or description of a vehicle, there wasn't much they could do. When the deputy arrived 20 minutes later, I explained what happened. He walked around the property, shining his flashlight along the edge of the woods. "Probably just a kid playing a prank," he said. "Halloween night, you know how it is." I nodded, but he looked uneasy too. Before leaving, he said, "If you see her again, don't open the door." After he left, I sat up for another hour just listening. No more knocks, no sounds. At around 4 a.m., I finally went to bed, though I didn't really sleep. When I got up the next morning, I went out to the porch to grab the newspaper. Something caught my eye near the doorframe. A small orange candy bag sat on the step, the same kind the girl had been holding. Inside were 3 wrapped candies and one thing that made my stomach drop, a small Polaroid photo. It showed my front door, taken from somewhere in the woods. That was a year ago. Every Halloween night since, I leave my lights off, my blinds closed, and I don't answer the door, because sometimes late at night when the wind dies down and the house gets quiet, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. Halloween used to be my favorite night of the year. I'm 28 now, and I still remember every sound, every smell, every chill from that night back in 2011, when I was 16, and I realized that monsters don't always wear masks. Grew up in a small town in northern Ohio. Quiet, isolated, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. My friends and I had a tradition every Halloween. We'd take the Loop. It was a long street that wound around a forested area and led to the old parts of town. The houses there were spaced far apart, most of them dark and creaky, but every year one house always stood out. That house was famous among local kids. It was the one that gave real candy, not the tiny bite-sized bars or generic lollipops. No, this guy handed out full-sized chocolate bars, sometimes even handfuls. People called him Mr. Rayburn. He was this quiet, balding man in his 50s who lived alone. Everyone assumed he was just a nice, lonely guy who liked Halloween. I didn't think much of it until that year. It was one of those dry, crisp nights. No wind, no rain, just dead leaves scraping across the pavement. I was out with my 2 friends, Danny and Kyle. We were too old for trick-or-treating, but too young to give up the fun. We wore lazy costumes, hoodies, cheap masks, mostly just to blend in and get free candy. By the time we reached the forest loop, the streets were emptying. Porch lights were going off and you could smell the smoke from people burning leaves nearby. We joked about how Rayburn's place was our last stop, as always. Kyle, being the loud one, said, "Man, watch. He's gonna give us like 5 bars each. Bet he's rich or something." Danny laughed. "Or just a creep who likes kids way too much." We all chuckled. But the moment we turned onto Birch Hollow Road, the laughter stopped. His house looked different that year. Usually he had a few fake cobwebs and a pumpkin or two, but this time it was almost too decorated. Orange string lights all over the porch, a fog machine puffing out mist, and a glowing plastic skeleton hanging from a tree. But what really caught my eye was the front door. It was wide open. A soft orange light spilled out from inside, flickering like candlelight. Kyle said, "Yo, door's open. Maybe he's handing candy out from inside this year." Danny hesitated. "Nah, that's weird, man. Who leaves their door open like that?" Felt a prickle run down my neck. The fog from the machine drifted around our feet as we walked closer. There were no other kids around, just silence, except for the faint hum of the fog machine. We reached the porch. The door was still open. Inside, I could see a hallway lit by warm light, and at the end of that hallway, a table with bowls of candy. Kyle grinned. "See? Told you. Guy's just going all out." And before either of us could stop him, he walked right in. I called after him, "Hey, dude, maybe don't..." But Kyle was already at the table, stuffing candy into his bag. Danny and I exchanged looks and followed, stepping carefully across the old wooden floor. The house smelled like dust and something else, something faintly metallic. "Mr. Rayburn?" I called out. No answer. The place was cleaner than I expected. No clutter, no decorations inside, just plain beige walls, family photos, and a single couch facing an old TV that was playing static. Kyle turned around with a laugh. Dude, jackpot, he's got like 10 bowls back here. Then he stopped talking. I followed his gaze to a door slightly ajar on the right side of the hall. There was movement. A shadow. We froze. Then the shadow moved forward, and a man stepped out. It was Mr. Rayburn. Only, he didn't look right. He was wearing a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, and his eyes looked sunken, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He smiled when he saw us. Too wide, too still. "Evening, boys," he said in a low voice. "You're a bit old for trick-or-treating, aren't you?" Kyle laughed nervously. "Yeah, just, one last year, you know." Rayburn nodded slowly, eyes scanning the candy bowls. "Take what you want, I bought too much this year." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. He didn't sound kind. He sounded tired, almost hollow. Danny whispered to me, "Let's go. Now." We started backing up. But then Rayburn said something that froze us all. "You three look familiar. Weren't you here last year?" Kyle shrugged. "Maybe. We come every year." Rayburn's smile widened. "Yes, I remember now. You came with the girl." We looked at each other. "Girl? What girl?" Kyle frowned. "What girl?" Rayburn tilted his head slightly, that same empty smile never fading. "She had a red costume. Said her name was Emma." There was a long pause. None of us knew an Emma. Rayburn's eyes flicked toward the back of the house. "She left something here last Halloween. Would you like to see it?" Before we could answer, he turned and started walking toward a door at the end of the hallway, a narrow wooden one leading downstairs. It creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Rayburn stopped halfway down the stairs and looked back up at us. "Come on, boys, don't be shy." That was the moment something in me snapped. Every instinct screamed no. I whispered to Danny, "We're leaving, now." But Kyle, always trying to be brave, took a few steps forward. "What is it?" he asked. Rayburn smiled again. "You'll see." And that's when Danny grabbed Kyle's arm. "Dude, no, let's go." The sound that came next is something I'll never forget. A faint metallic clink from the darkness below. Rayburn slowly turned his head, his voice suddenly sharper. "Leaving already?" I didn't wait to answer. I grabbed both my friends and bolted for the door. As we ran across the porch, I heard footsteps behind us, heavy, uneven ones. I didn't look back. I just remember the sound of the front door slamming shut, and the fog machine still hissing uselessly beside the steps. Didn't stop running until we reached the next block. Danny bent over, gasping, "What the hell was that?" Kyle looked pale, genuinely shaken. He was holding something like a chain or something. None of us spoke after that. We went home, tried to laugh it off, told ourselves it was just a creepy old man being weird. But the story didn't end there. A week later, there was a story on the local news. The headline read, "Local man found dead in his home." It was Mr. Rayburn. According to the report, a neighbor called the cops after smelling something foul. They found him in the basement. Apparently, he had fallen down the stairs and broken his neck. But that wasn't the strange part. The police also found something else. In the corner of the basement were several boxes filled with Halloween decorations, old candy wrappers, and dozens of Polaroid photos. Every photo showed kids standing on his porch through the years, including one of 3 boys, us. And in the corner of that photo, standing partly in the shadows, was a girl in a red costume. We never saw her that night. We never even knew her. Cops questioned us briefly, asked if we knew anything. We said no, of course. The house stayed vacant after that. Every year since, the new owners put their porch light off on Halloween night. Sometimes, when I drive past it, I still picture that open door, the flickering light, and Rayburn's hollow voice saying, "She left something here last Halloween." And I always wonder, what if Kyle had gone down those stairs? Halloween used to mean fun, candy, movies, parties. But ever since that night in 2017, I can't walk down a quiet street without looking over my shoulder. Because that was the year I realized just how easy it is for a normal night to turn into something you can't explain, something you can't forget. I was 22, fresh out of college, working part-time at a coffee shop while saving to move out of my parents' place. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Pittsburgh, mostly families, nice lawns, people who waved when they drove by. That Halloween, my parents went to a costume party across town and left me home to hand out candy. I didn't mind. I liked seeing the costumes, and I figured it'd be an easy, quiet night. But around 9:30, something happened that still plays in my mind like a looped nightmare. The evening had gone normally, the usual rounds of little ghosts and superheroes, parents waiting at the curb. By 9, the street had gone quiet. Porch lights started turning off one by one. I was about to do the same when I heard footsteps outside, slow ones, crunching the leaves on the sidewalk. Then came a faint knock. Not loud, just deliberate. Knock. Knock. When I opened the door, there was a girl standing there, maybe 10 years old, dressed as a witch. Her black hat was too big and her face paint was smudged. Behind her I saw no one. No parents, no friends. Just the street, empty under the dim orange glow of the streetlight. "Trick or treat," she said softly, barely above a whisper. Something about her voice was off. It wasn't shy, it was flat, like she was reading words she didn't understand. I smiled awkwardly and held out the bowl. "Hey there, you're out late. Where are your parents?" She didn't answer, just looked down, grabbed a single piece of candy, and said again, "Trick or treat." Then she turned and walked away. No running, no skipping, just slow, steady steps until she disappeared down the road. I closed the door, brushed it off, and sat back down. But after a few minutes, curiosity got the better of me. Through the living room window, I saw her again, standing under the same streetlight a little ways down the street, just standing there facing my house. I waited for a car, a parent, something. But the street was empty. She didn't move for almost 2 minutes. Then, from the shadow beyond the streetlight, another figure appeared, untall, adult-sized. The man was wearing a dark coat and a mask. Not a Halloween mask. It looked like one of those plain white blank masks used in theater plays. He walked up behind the girl, placed a hand on her shoulder, and they both just stood there under the light. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward my house. My stomach dropped. I stepped back from the window instinctively. The porch light was still on, so he could see me if I moved too close to the glass. I turned it off, then peeked again through the blinds. The man and the girl were gone, just like that. No cars, no footsteps, nothing. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe they'd crossed the street or gone around the corner. Still, something about it crawled under my skin. I locked the door, checked the back door, even made sure the windows were latched. That's when I heard it again. Knock, knock. I froze. It was the same rhythm. Slow, deliberate, but softer this time. Coming from the side door that led to the kitchen. Nobody ever used that door. It opened to the narrow space between our house and the neighbor's fence, basically an alley of shadows. I crept toward it, phone in hand, recording without even thinking. Through the frosted glass, I saw 2 shapes. One small, one tall. The girl was standing close to the door again, the man behind her in that same blank mask. His hand was on her shoulder, just resting there. They weren't moving, just standing. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You forgot your treat." That was enough. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound, then ran upstairs and locked myself in my room. I called 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained what I'd seen. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line until officers arrived. I sat by the window upstairs, peeking through the blinds. The streetlight flickered, and for a second, I swear I saw that white mask staring up toward my window. When the police showed up about 10 minutes later, the street was empty. They looked around, checked both yards, even went over to the neighbor's property. No footprints, no candy wrappers, nothing. One of the officers, a middle-aged guy with a mustache, said gently, "It's Halloween, sir." Probably just someone pulling a prank. I wanted to believe that. But the way that man stood there, it didn't feel like a prank. It felt like he was waiting. They took a quick statement, told me to call again if anything happened, and left. For the rest of the night, I kept every light off and sat awake by the window just watching the street. I didn't see them again. When my parents came home around 1 a.m., I didn't even tell them right away. They laughed when I finally did, assuming I'd scared myself from watching too many Halloween videos online. But the next morning, my mom found something strange on the porch, a small black bucket. Inside were 3 pieces of candy and a folded note. The note said, "Thank you for letting her visit. She loves Halloween." No name, no handwriting, just typed words on plain paper. I took it straight to the police station. The same officer who'd come last night looked surprised. He asked me to describe the girl again, around 10 years old, long hair, black witch hat, smudged face paint. He nodded slowly, then called another officer over. They exchanged looks. Then he said, "We got a report earlier this morning. A man wearing a white mask was seen near Cedarview Park last night, trying to talk to kids. Apparently, several people had called in. One parent even chased him off when he tried to approach their child. But no one had seen his car, and no one could identify him because of the mask. The cop took the note, told me they'd keep an eye out, and sent me home." Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing else happened, at least not directly. But strange things started appearing around the neighborhood. A black witch hat left on a bench, a small pumpkin placed in the middle of someone's driveway, a candy bucket sitting by a stop sign, always late at night, always gone by morning. People started locking their doors earlier, keeping porch lights off on Halloween after that year. I moved out the next summer, but I never stopped thinking about that man and the girl. 3 years later, I was cleaning. My old phone when I found the short video I'd recorded that night. It's only 14 seconds long. The frame's shaky. Just my kitchen door, frosted glass glowing faintly orange from the streetlight outside. You can barely make out their outlines. But they're there, the girl standing motionless and the taller shadow behind her, hand resting on her shoulder. Then halfway through the clip, the girl lifts her head slightly. And if you pause it right at that moment, her reflection in the glass looks wrong. Her face isn't a child's. It's blurred, stretched somehow, like a distortion, and behind her reflection, that white mask seems closer than it should be, like he was leaning in toward the glass. Every Halloween since, I make sure I'm never home alone. I still live in Pennsylvania, a few towns over, now, but I avoid streets with old lamps and houses with open yards. Because no matter where I go, I keep thinking I'll see that same faint orange light, that same blank face under it. Sometimes, when I walk home late, I'll catch a glimpse of movement near the end of the block, someone standing still under a streetlight watching, and even though my rational mind says it's just my imagination, my gut still whispers the same 2 words that echo from that Halloween night: trick or treat.